Of all the opinions I hold, the least controversial one is that Mad Max Fury Road was impossibly incredible. This film was a brash, unapologetic, and uncompromising vehicular action spectacle. It knew exactly what it wanted to be and executed it flawlessly. It was my introduction to the franchise, and a few months later, I was quite pleased to see that a video game adaptation was being worked on titled Mad Max. This name does not inspire optimism. What does inspire optimism is that Avalanche Games would be behind the product. Known for the Just Cause series, they certainly know how to make exceedingly satisfying chaos simulators. If any studio was going to nail that breakneck action of Fury Road, I think they might just be the best pick. I don't know what I was expecting from this release, but I was quite enthralled, enchanted, and captivated. The audience reception seemed lukewarm at best, and I can see why. This title released at a time when the market was awash with Ubisoft-style repetitive, soulless, and derivative open-world collectathons. However, I wasn't one to indulge in this category of games precisely because they didn't spark much interest in me. I don't know if that's what I expected this game to be, but I did expect building up a war machine on four wheels in a sand-blasted wasteland would be central, and that premise was compelling enough to warrant a purchase. I'm not going to call it revolutionary or a trendsetter, but I do find myself urging to play the game once every 1 or 2 years. This is a staying power few other games have with me. I'm talking of games with solid gameplay and even more solid atmospheres. A set of games such as Wolfenstein: The New Saga, the Half-Life series, the Quakes, the Metros, and I think that's a pretty high praise. Therefore, I'd like to dedicate this video in appreciation of this seemingly derivative, repetitive, and uncreative, and yet thought-provoking, inspiring, and just plain fun game. The gameplay in Mad Max has two main layers, driving a car and exploring on foot. The former is probably the stronger of the two, and within this layer the car combat is unrivaled when it comes to satisfaction, and is usually what people remember most fondly. The overall gameplay structure, as mentioned previously, follows a derivative formula of a big open world littered with side activities to check off and a set of scripted story missions. The moment-to-moment gameplay is more varied, however. Let's talk about the car combat. The combination of the visceral sounds of car parts scraping along each other, the ferocious camera effects, and the explosions. Oh my god, the explosions! The Just Cause DNA really shines through here. The combat amounts to more than just smashing things to pieces. You've got a selection of weapons operated by the gremlin sidekick in the back, a harpoon to tear off doors, wheels and even drivers off of enemy vehicles, a thunderstick for projecting direct explosive damage, grinder rims to shred apart a car too close for comfort, a pair of deadly flamethrowers which guzzle your fuel supply. And if all else fails, you can always pull out your shotgun. The car chases are exciting, spectacular and brutally satisfying. They can take the form of random encounters throughout the open world, but there are more curated instances as well. One of the flavors of side activities are convoy chases. While driving around the map, some roads will be marked by black tracks. This is a route that a convoy travels along. A lead truck will be escorted by a selection of combat-ready, gas-guzzling, metal monsters of war. The battle is won when the central truck is destroyed. You can approach this scenario however you wish. Setting up an ambush in a favorable spot is advised. You can also use the sniper rifle from the back of your magnum opus to eliminate some cars from afar. However, an interception followed by direct attack is often the most thrilling way to play here. In both types of combat, there's some very satisfying slow motion effects to punctuate moments of strong impact, as well as camera shake and visceral effects of fire and blood. The flip side of the coin is the on-foot gameplay sections, chief among them the camps. Those are the biggest locations to explore and usually filled with the most combat encounters as well. The hand-to-hand combat is quite basic and lacks depth. Most of the time, you'll be pressing one button for a combo of light attacks, with a well-timed parry thrown in when another enemy decides to attack. You can also perform a heavy strike to break through a guard or to execute a powerful chain finisher move. There will be some curveballs thrown in, such as enemies with weapons and shields, or a war cry to buff nearby foes. Despite its simplicity, the hand-to-hand combat manages to be very satisfying. There's bone crunches to many of your strikes, and the animations even on the light attacks feel quite vicious. I wish there was a bit more gunplay, as the shotgun only really serves as a quick consumable insta-kill option you will rarely end up using. In the end, chaining together attacks between groups of enemies and whittling them down one at a time certainly makes me feel like a badass, even if the animations sometimes get a little clunky with how they blend into one another. The devs have shown some exceeding creativity in designing unique set pieces given these fairly simple ingredients. Aside from the combat, however, the location design and exploration manages to be very unique and interesting. Some of them will be in huge underground caverns or suspended on the side of a cliff face, hanging over a vertigo-inducing abyss. One of them is a huge colosseum in the center of a volcano, and another is a long-forgotten and decayed diner. Aside from those, there will be smaller scavenging locations, and many of those try to tell some small story with their environmental design, as well as history relics. Those are little collectibles, usually some photo or postcard, with some text scribbled at the back. They tell of the world before and during the collapse, how we ran out of oil and water. There seems to have been some pandemic as well, how humans turned to violence and the ensuing descent into savagery. Small glimpses into a world long past. The atmosphere overall is crazy good. The visual and sound teams have done a tremendous job emulating the art style and tone of Fury Road. The cars would look right at home in the film. Some of them are scrappy hack jobs, not based on anything particular. However, each of the different car bodies you can put on the Magnum Opus emulates some real-world muscle car icon, and they look appropriately badass. Some of the enemy vehicles look really interesting as well. I am especially fond of this offensive slab of metal, with an immensely powerful ram at the front, and even nitrous to further boost the attack power. The environment is a little different than what's presented in the film though. To make for more interesting gameplay, there has to be a selection of makeshift encampments, ruined structures, and a healthy dose of wrecked cars, planes, and boats. The last is especially prevalent in the Great White region, which is a dried-up seabed. The Dead Barrens are where you'll find locations more common to our everyday lives, such as houses, bridges, power plants, and the like. All of them look suitably decayed, and some of them have been repurposed into strongholds. And above it all, Gastown is the landmark you can always see, pumping out black smoke into the atmosphere, just so you're never confused as to where you're going. The scope, however, is a little different from Fury Road, where the film was almost non-stop bombastic action, with grand chases and epic set pieces. The game is a little more reserved and somber. There will be occasional nail-biting sequences, such as the aforementioned convoy chases. However, a lot of the time you'll only be interacting with a few enemies at most, and for another large percentage, there are going to be no threats at all, just you and the wasteland. It might be generous to call the gameplay in those sections as puzzles, but there's always something varied to do. You might have to find an explosive to open a door, a fuel can to enable a hot air balloon, a winch to open a gate, etc. These little snippets of gameplay remind me a little of the classic Doom games, where each room has some idea and flow to it. There's certainly an element of solving the environment. The main story is not some RPG level grand narrative with complex characters and deep backstories. However, that doesn't make it bad to me. It makes me feel compassion, sadness, camaraderie, and fear. And that's a success in of itself. The characters feel quite distinct with their personalities, and I just really enjoy interacting with them. Chumbucket is the slightly crazy loyal sidekick and mechanic. Griffa is the mystical shaman with unknown goals, who seems to know impossibly much about Max and his past. Jeet, Gutgash, Pinkai, and Deep Freya are the reluctant allies you're helping along the way. Scrotus is the purely evil maniac antagonist and Immortan Joe's son. And Max is a vehicle for the plot most of the time. The events of the storyline amount to a revenge story, but it feels like no story beat is pointless. Everything feels poignant to some degree. To be honest, I quite enjoyed the story, and it made me reflect somewhat on how we treat the world and each other. The progression in this game follows four paths, so to speak. Two of those involve upgrading the magnum opus and Max himself. This is done at the cost of scrap, which is the primary currency in this game. Unfortunately, the scrap economy is kind of broken. This resource is acquired from looting locations, scavenging bodies, destroying cars, and periodic rewards from dismantled camps. Firstly, the values of these income sources are weird and unbalanced. You can spend upwards of 20 minutes collecting a few pickups, usually worth 10 to 20 each, for maybe 200 scrap tops. And let me underline that this is a best case scenario. But every 20 minutes, you will get a scrap payout equal to 40 scrap for every single camp you've dismantled up to this point in the game, maxing out at over 700 at a time. What does this encourage? I think it makes looting locations on foot feel kind of pointless. Furthermore, for some reason, camps and scavenging spots later in the game don't really reward any more scrap than early on. Conversely, the prices of some upgrades absolutely skyrocket. Let's take a look at the grinder rims parts you can install on your car. The first part on the list costs 300 scrap. Okay, a fairly reasonable amount. The second part deals double damage and costs only 100 scrap. This is weirdly low, especially considering that you don't need to buy the very first upgrade to unlock the second. Let's see what the third and final upgrade costs, which lets you deal triple damage. 1800! Don't get me wrong, it's quite satisfying to build up your car in this game, but the pacing of the progression just feels all over the place. Let's also consider two alternate luck-based methods of making scrap. Scrapulences are unarmored and unarmed vehicles, which you might occasionally find driving around, or parked in camps and the like. Commandeering this truck and delivering it to a stronghold nets you a nifty 500 scrap. The second are the storms. These are rare events in which a huge dust storm will envelop the map, sending debris flying your way like deadly needles. The feeling of driving into a storm for the first time rivals that feeling of awe and danger from the film. The rapidly encroaching cloud of dust, the loud wail of the wind, and the now puny cry of your engine trying to break from underneath it all. These can be very difficult to survive early on, but there's also treasure hidden within. Large crates will tumble around, and you must stop them using your harpoon and break them open for 300 scrap inside each crate. Now consider how some scavenging locations will only have a few scrap to pick up, and you realize where your priorities should be. I still collect everything just for the completionism, but that's just me. The enemy designs aren't shockingly varied and creative. There's three main antagonist factions: the brutal and organized underlings of Scrotus, the nomad and agendaless roadkill, as well as the mysterious and faceless buzzards. Unfortunately, each of the generic troops are merely reskins of an enemy archetype. Most of them are some variation on an ill-tempered dude. Some have weapons, some can grapple onto you, some charge forth, slicing with their shiv. The meanest of them even have a shield, and a significant amount of health. However, there's a more interesting variation. The ferals are young and aggressive. They've been raised like animals, kept in cages and gagged. They cannot speak. Some sick fuck even decided a selection of them should be strapped with explosives. The films can be dark and brutal, but this theme takes the game in an even more disturbing direction. With all these elements taken together, the game becomes an atmospheric Mad Max simulator, filled with interesting exploration, satisfying combat, and somber introspection at what the world has become. The visual and audio design would fit right at home in Fury Road, but the pacing is more akin to Road Warrior. I feel like this game went severely underrated for how solid it is. And even George Miller, the director of the films, doesn't seem to think very highly of it. The sales and reception were mediocre, and so there's a decent chance we won't see another Mad Max game anytime soon. However, it would be a shame to forget this little gem, and I hope I brought this game to the radars of some of you. Thanks for watching.